Welcome to Danny Houlihan's Irish Experience podcast. Join Danny on a journey through the historical island of Ireland, its people and the wild Atlantic Way, which is Ireland's last frontier. Experience the music and the culture that makes up the longest coastal driving route in the world. Now, please welcome your host, Danny Houlihan.
Couldn't fall to good Tralee and Atlantic Ian. Welcome to the Wild Atlantic Way and Danny Houlihan's Irish Experience Show. I hope you're all keeping well and safe, my friends, and if you're driving, walking or jogging, please take care. In this episode, I travelled inland from the Wild Atlantic Way route to Lisselton, County Kerry, to the townland of Loughanes. This is a special place I always wanted to visit on my travels out on the mighty Wild Atlantic Way route here in North Kerry, Ireland. This journey brings my show to a place which are many on the landscape of ancient Éireann. Some are well known than others forgotten in time, and practices used by our people and that were put on our people and our culture as a nation. At a time, if a child was born during the years from the 1500s, according to archaeologists and scholars, and later in the developing church, infants not baptised into the Catholic Church were buried in unconsecrated ground called Limbo. Today, we identify these places called Cillin, Cillini, and also Celurach, which dot the landscape of Ireland. When a child died in Ireland during this horrific period, the grief and the loss of a child sent a family into turmoil with no doctor or priest present. The saddest part of this was that when the infant died in his mother's arms, the child was then wrapped in a cloth and taken away from its grief-stricken mother by a man, a neighbour, or a grieving father, quickly from her, and spirited away to a lonely, isolated place on a grassy hillside, the banks of a river, or indeed the perimeter of an old ring fort to be buried. Even in death, the little ones were not given the humanity of a proper burial by day, with its mother, father, and neighbours all around to lament their passing. But under the light of the moon, and often in the darkness, placed in a damp hole in the ground, not even a priest to say a few prayers were uttered. They were forgotten in time, unbaptised, and not regarded by the Roman Catholic Church of the day to be buried in consecrated ground. Only in the minds and hearts of its mothers, fathers, and families will remember the children's short, precious existence on this earth, and indeed where the little ones were buried. These precious children were in limbo, according to the church practices of the day, where children unbaptized in the eyes of God, and at that time had not ascended to heaven, having original sin, and thus buried in areas called limbo, or in Latin, limbus infantium, on the edge or on the boundary. Limbo and its origins here in North Kerry can be taken from archaeological research and old Irish traditions, both oral handed down, drawn from our people, infer that the practice of this religious direction was given by the Holy See, the Roman Catholic Church, in their wisdom of the day, asserted that those precious children buried in Cillini, and also those children buried within old churches and ring forts and other places, were considered to be marginal. Thus the practice was supported by St. Augustine, St. Thomas Aquinas, and others. Sadly, over time, many of the infants' families immigrated or died, and the places where these special Irish infants were buried were long forgotten and overgrown with weeds and grass. Only small stones and markers facing east would remain. These places were located, as I've stated, in isolated locations, such as hillsides, even old ring forts which were used as burial grounds. Some of these special sites have been levelled by diggers to extend fields. I have to say, not the fault of the farmer, as the locations of some of these special places or Cillini were not marked on maps. Other sites that were marked on ordnance survey maps were sometimes adopted by the farmers of the land and minded for posterity, which we should all give a word of thanks to them for doing so. What were the thoughts that ran through those women's minds as they held their dead infants for a brief time in their arms, then being taken away from them in those dark, cold nights? They could not even be present at the burial of their child. The marks of their sorrow would remain with them until their own death. A sense of extreme grief and that of lack of forewarning and the sadness by those women. What went through their minds during that period, with no doctors present, not even a priest, we will never know and appreciate. What happened, as researchers, we can only speculate. It must have been horrendous for those women. In 2023, I travelled out to a local place where there is an infant's burial ground, Lisselton, North Kerry, Ireland. Leaving lovely Lisselton Cross, North Kerry, I took the road to the rear of the shop, in the direction of the hill to the east, over about 1 kilometre. The countryside is scenic, with the ditches full in bloom of wildflowers. I continued along for about 1 mile to the graveyard in Lisselton, in the townland of Loughanes. I pulled in to the left. There was plenty of room to park. It was a cold enough day. Everyone, it's a scenic place, with the ruins and the graveyard and the high ruined church tower with a free-flowing stream running in front. The graveyard and Cillini is registered under the National Monuments Act as KE 005-067, burial ground. Coordinates are E492854, N 639500, 1 kilometre from Lisselton Cross. The church and graveyard is located very close. Numbers are KE 005-066. Both of these sites are recorded and protected under the National Monuments Act 1930 to 2004. As I stated, in the distance, the ruins of the old Protestant church tower breaks the Irish skyline where many local people are buried within the confines of a former early Christian site. As I walked towards the graveyard, the sound of a running river could clearly be heard in the distance, making its way near the river. Oh, what a beautiful place Lisselton is, and this special spot. It is well worth a visit on the Wild Atlantic Way when you visit Ireland. A sign to my left catches my attention. Celurach. Like children to limbo, my poems were carried off to a twilight zone where trees remained leafless from time immemorial. Beside these little bodies, wooden bowls were laid so they could drink the milk that a woman doles out to them. There is no gravestone, just quartz pebbles scattered in a broken rosary beads. If you go by, mind my little ones. Don't disturb them in their forgotten resting place. That was by Breedney Mourne. Beautiful piece, absolutely beautiful. I have reached the spot where in those times our infants were laid in the cold darkness of night, in their final resting place, between the river and the graveyard. Only the sound of the trees and the stream echoes in the clear Lisselton air. Now and again the breeze will come up. On the wall a plaque has been erected, which is a credit to the community. It's marked Infant Burial Ground. A credit to the community. Everyone, there are no fancy reeds, there are no marked headstones. But for a moment, I could see nothing but grass. However, as I explored the small site, sure enough, there in the grass are the small little headstones about 2 feet apart. More even. I measured with my tape. The final resting place of our people, our infant ancestors who now lie at rest here. This was an experience I could feel. The quietness and the stillness within the site, bar the breeze blowing through the trees and the sound of a nearby stream in the distance. After all, it was the little children that lie here. One could feel their presence, here in their final resting place in Loughanes, Lisselton. I thought to myself, this is definitely Dorchas gan Fian in the Old Irish language, darkness without pain, which was inflicted on these children way back in antiquity. I wondered where are their ancestors now, indeed some buried, or indeed their descendants in America, Australia, Canada and other destinations. The site was cleaned up many years ago by a group of enthusiastic local people. I know some of them. All that I can say to all is well done. I remember kneeling at the graveside of quite a few of these children. My mind was taken back to those times when man's inhumanity to woman and child was at its height, in this case the children and their grieving mothers. I also thought, who were those men, possibly fathers, uncles and relations, who walked the old bog roads of Ballyduff, Lisselton and Ballyconnery and the surrounding countryside and brought their dead children to this quiet place to rest? We shall never know their names. Today, a road runs by the side of the burial ground and that of the graveyard. So time moves on and people pass by daily this burial ground, where our Irish infants are forever young, they will not age. I will return to the site again to discuss the site and other information, and the roadway that cuts through the site. No ancestors visit the site now. They too are gone, and their people, the lucky ones who emigrated, do not know that they are there, where they lie today in their final resting place in North Kerry Island. This infant's burial ground, like others in North Kerry, should be protected for eternity as part of our past and our link to the future. I take my leave of Ballyduff and Lisselton now, and the children. I'll be back to visit them again. They won't be forgotten by Danny Houlihan. I travelled out one more time in search of another place and another journey to explore and experience the Cillin Kilmore Ballyduff, County Kerry, Ireland. The historic Kilmore graveyard in Cillin is situated within the old townland of Kilmore, County Kerry, Ireland, geographically located 4 kilometres southwest of Ballybunion and 4 kilometres approximately to the northwest of the beautiful village of Ballyduff, Tralee, County Kerry, Ireland. The site, like Lisselton, is recorded in the records of monuments and places as number KE 009-002. Maps from the period I consulted were the extract from the OS First Edition 1846, sheet 009 Kilmore, Ordnance Survey sheet Kilmore Graveyard, extract from the Ordnance Survey 2nd Edition 1898, sheet 009-02. Arriving at the historic site, there's a car park. The views from the mouth of the Shannon estuary are breathtaking, with the outcrop of sandstone rock in full view. Steps lead down to the beach below, where during the summer months, people from around the countryside take to this secluded beach. It's well known locally. The stone wall of the Cillin at Kilmore stands out against the scenic surroundings. On the wall, there are several plaques erected to highlight the great history of the area and that of the graveyard of the Cillin of Kilmore. Not far away from the site, to the east, is marked on the Ordnance Survey maps the Field of the Seven Churches, thus indicating the level of early Christian activity in the area of Ballyduff prior to the Norman invasion. This area has a unique historical past, which can be traced back to the dawn of time and the arrival of the first settlers along our shoreline, and the many early Christian and pre-Christian settlements such as Labyrinth, which was based in the area. Walking through the gate of Kilmore, like Lisselton, I could get a sense of loss and that of peace that prevails from the site, which, like others, is kept in great condition thanks to the locals. The name Kilmore takes its name from Kill, a church or cell, more being large, or the big church. There are no visible remains of the church today, which once existed on the site and on the outskirts of Ballyduff, Tralee, County Kerry, Ireland. But this is a special place. Scattered around me in the long grass were the markers of our people, both young and old, forgotten in time, but not the local community, which cherishes this area of Kilmore. Of those buried there, we know of but a few. To quote the Kerryman newspaper in an article many years ago, quote, Alfred Faulkner Wheelhouse, a junior 7th engineer in the Mercantile Marine on board the SS Lusitania. He was killed when the Lusitania was sunk by a German submarine in 1915. The reference refers to his parents, Matilda Wheelhouse and Frederick Faulkner Wheelhouse, buried within Kilmore Burial Ground near Ballyduff, unquote. The site at Kilmore was also used as a place of burial for unknown sailors, washed ashore in bygone times, and that were afforded a burial by the local community. Also, a few other names have been mentioned: Maws, Springs, Hungervilles and Whelan's, all buried within the confines of this priceless Christian relic. Walking quietly around the empty Cillin and graveyard, there were only a few markers left there. Indeed, there are hundreds buried here, forgotten in time, but not by the local community who keeps the history alive. Again, this was an experience worth visiting, a special place with the children and those buried here along the wild Atlantic Way. Leaving this beautiful scenic area, I take my leave of Cillin and Kilmore, again like others, with a true feeling of the circumstances of the deaths of so many lovely young people, indeed both young and old, during a time in their lives which left a sad mark. But for those who survived and emigrated, there was hope, and our people settled in America, England, Australia, Canada and other destinations, not losing their connection with Ireland, and indeed Ballyduff, Tralee, North Kerry return in numbers each year to visit the area and pay tribute to their ancestors. Once again, I must take my leave of another historical place, Kilmore, North Kerry, Ireland. If you are visiting Ireland, this is another special place to put on your list, and of course the area of Ballyduff, which has Ireland's most preserved round tower. It's fabulous and well worth the visit. You can also check out my podcast on Ratu, on my podcast series. It should be noted that I have only mentioned 2 sites in this episode, but sadly there are many, many more. I will try to visit them all during the course of my podcast series. Also, to follow this, check out Danny Houlihan's Facebook page for pictures of the areas I visit. Also the website, which will be going up shortly. From the shoreline of Kilmore, facing the wild Atlantic Way, and inland from the Children's Burial Ground in Lisselton, I say bye for now. Slán.
Thanks for listening to our show. Through its people, its heritage and its rugged coastline, this is truly Danny Houlihan's Irish experience. Bye for now.